Now, some you will know about because you know their stories, and others you might not know about. I reckon one person, our next speaker, is one of those people. Emeritus Professor Cath Rogers once travelled a huge distance. Please welcome our Dean of Health.
Thanks, Clement. Hi, everyone. Oh, those lights are bright, aren't they? I'd like to tell you a story that I don't think I've told anyone before in its completeness anyway. It's been great to write it, so thank you. I was indeed born a long way away in England. I was the third child in six children to my parents, Jack and Wyn Rogers. And when I was 7 years old, I was living in Cornwall. I've been back to Cornwall, it's pretty idyllic. By that time, my dad, Jack, was 72 years old. He was much older than my mum, and he had health difficulties. He'd actually fought in the First World War, and he had some ongoing lung problems, and his doctor said, you would do better in a warmer climate. Well, where else would we come to but Australia? So we landed in a little township called Burnett Heads, just outside Bundaberg, and Dad bought us a house on the beach. It should have been idyllic, right? Well, that part of it was. We kids went to Burnett Heads State School, a 3-teacher school at that point. Now, as migrants go, I think we were really lucky. We were white, we came from a Christian background, and English was our first language. But the kids at Burnett Heads State School didn't think so. We were the little pommy bastards from the first day, and truly we never fit in. In a way, not fitting in was something I was used to by that time. When I was born with a severe squint, which meant my beautiful left eye didn't point forward, but kind of headed off in that direction. It was cosmetically not particularly attractive and was going to have long-term implications for my vision, which it actually did. But anyway, from when I was 12 months old, I wore a big patch on my good eye to get my bad eye to work, and heavy and thick glasses, and my sisters and brothers gave me hell about it. Now, looking back, that wasn't very kind of them. But actually, we weren't in a kind family, to be honest. My father was a tough man. He was demanding, he could be charming but also very cruel, and he liked to set we sisters and brothers against each other. He set very high expectations for his children, and I for one never felt like I lived up to them. Some of the expectations he reserved for his daughters, and the first and biggest and the most significant for me was that he told us regularly that we were born, so many of us, I'm one of 4 daughters, we were born to look after Mum because he knew that he would die long before her. So we were there as Mum's insurance. I guess other expectations echoed the times. We were in the 1970s in rural Australia after all. So as girls, while we were encouraged, in fact it was demanded by Dad that we do well at school, at the same time there was an assumption at home that marriage and family would be what would be our future and would bring us promise. By the time I was 17, I guess I didn't have a very well-formed sense of self. I didn't really know what to do with my life other than looking for a husband, because that's what I've been taught to do. But I had to think about something to do in the meantime, between finishing school and getting married and having that family. And I had no idea, really. But I had been really affected by the domiciliary nurses who'd come into our home to look after Dad when he was sick and dying 2 years earlier. Things were pretty chaotic at home. Mum was completely overwhelmed and we didn't really know what to do. And those nurses came in. Yeah, they looked after Dad, but they looked after us too. They just got it. They could feel the pressure in the house, they could feel the tension, and they were just, by their presence, able to provide some solace. So I decided to go nursing, and at the tender age of just turned 17, I headed off. And I had no idea what was in store for me. It was pretty challenging, and I saw things that most 17-year-olds wouldn't. But if nursing was hard, adult life was even harder. I went looking for love. That was what I was supposed to do, right? But as the song goes, in all the wrong places. I got myself into some relationship rabbit holes that took me a long time to dig myself out of. And none of that was particularly good for my self-esteem. But funnily enough, running in parallel along that was something absolutely fantastic. I'd gone to a talk by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who, if you know her work, is an absolute guru on death and dying, and I was so totally inspired with her and her talk about the psychology of dying that I went and enrolled in a psychology degree. I loved university. Honestly, I found my place. I loved learning, I loved thinking, I loved talking, I loved reading, I loved writing, the whole lot. It just was fantastic. And so for the next 6 years, I studied part-time, continued to work, and had the first of my 2 sons, Joseph. I finished that degree when I was in my late 20s, and I was immediately offered a job in nursing education. Not too many nurses had a degree at that point. Really, I never looked back. As I moved through my early 30s, I had the second of my children, Sebastian. I finished my master's, and I was just about ready to enrol in my PhD. Life was going well. And then one evening, I got the phone call that any of us would dread. Could I please immediately go to the emergency department? And there I found my younger sister, who had taken yet another drug overdose. And this time it was really touch and go. And I remember sitting in that very cold Toowoomba emergency department on a very hard bench just outside the resuscitation bay, listening to the team work on my sister, Janice. And I wasn't sure that she would survive. That was a very long night. She did survive, I'm pleased to tell you. And from there on in, I thought, why is it? You know, we both grew up in the same family. Yeah, it was tough. But how is it that I seem to be able to move on with my life and she is still struggling with hers? And that got me reading some more. I stumbled across the literature about resilience, and resilience became the focus of my PhD. When I finished my PhD, well, my career flourished. That's what I tell everyone now. Do your PhD, because really my academic career just took off, and it was an exciting time. My personal life was pretty much sorted. Things changed. I found love in the right place. I watched my kids grow up, and I progressed in my academic career. But I guess some things didn't change. I continued to look out for my mum, although on my terms this time. She's now 93 and living in aged care, and she has a fighting spirit like you would never imagine. She inspired me to turn my research focus towards quality of life in older people in residential aged care. And so with some long-term research colleagues, we went into aged care and we spoke to older people living there, and we asked them, what gives you a lift in life? What gives you peace and joy? Well, those people had plenty to say. They talked about the pretty little birds outside in the tree. They talked about a kind word or a joke with their carers. They talked about family members coming to visit. They talked about reminiscing about happy times in their lives. These people were full of gratitude. And it was very clear to me and my research colleagues that they continued to have hope in their lives and meaning and purpose for their lives. Now that's a pretty different story to the story we hear about how life ends the day you walk into aged care, and I think it's an important story to tell. So that's been fabulous. I've done that research over before and over this past year when I've been at Torrens University, and I'd have to say this year has been one of the happiest years of my life, personally and professionally. I became a grandmother. And if anyone would like to see the photos, I have plenty. But I also came to Torrens and just felt like I'd come to the right place at the right time in my life and career. I've learned a lot being in the university system for my entire career, and it's such a joy to come to a new emerging university and give some of that back. I just love it. And as you can tell from my story, my life has been transformed through education, so I'm a powerful believer in its power. Just as I was preparing to do this last week, I was sitting having a chat with my younger son, Sebastian, Sebastian's a doctor now, and he's in preparation to become an obstetrician. And he said, "Mum, I want you to know that I couldn't have done any of this without you." I said, "Oh, don't be ridiculous, Seb, you've done it all yourself, you know, you've worked hard." He said, "Mum, I've watched you struggle and I've watched you triumph, and that has taught me more about the complexity of life than anything else could have. And every day when I'm looking after the women that I care for, I know I can do a better job because I remember you." So education hasn't just transformed my life, I think. It's transformed my children's lives, and I'm pretty sure it'll transform my grandchildren's lives as well. Thank you.